This is a true story, hence the throwaway account, and it's one of the first times I've ever told it to anyone. 15 years ago, I made one of the worst decisions of my life. I began dealing for a well-known biker gang. No, I wasn't a member, but I had connections to one of their members through a mutual friend, Josh. I had a short history in dealing years before I got clean and walked the straight and narrow. I worked 3 jobs and was saving for college. However, tragedy struck when a very close relative of mine was murdered by her new husband while they were traveling in his home country. What made this even more difficult is that they had canceled their life insurance, so the cost of returning them to our country and the funeral arrangements fell on me and 2 other relatives. Now, this isn't an excuse for what I did. I just wanted to provide some context to what was going through my head when I met with Josh and asked to set up a meeting with his relative Mike, who was a member of a well-known biker gang, so that I could get back on my feet financially. If you're asking yourself why I didn't just pursue one of the millions of other avenues for financial assistance, it's because I was young, stupid, and wanted to replace that lost feeling with something I thought would make me feel better about myself at the time. So I gathered a team of hand-picked dealers at my house and waited for Mike to come by and discuss business, and soon enough, he arrives with 2 pounds of weed to front to me. My plan was to only involve myself by distributing to my runners so that I could work my regular jobs while making a passive income. Side note, I had known Mike for about a year at this point, which is why so much was given up front. The term front means to loan, and the term runner refers to a dealer who works for you. Things went well over the next year and a half. My team expanded. I was making a ton of money. I sold the weed to my runners by the ounce, paid a discount per pound, and was making hundreds in profit a week and thousands a month. I was happy, Mike was happy, and he only ever had to deal with me and never had to meet or address any of my runners. However, this is where the story takes a drastic turn for the worse and why you should never trust a biker gang, especially when you're not working on the inside. I had just hired a good friend of mine as a runner. She needed money, was a single mother, and wanted to sell it to her friends who came over and always needed weed. This girl ended up selling through ounces faster than anyone else, so I trusted her with more product to sell at once since I would have to come back 2 or 3 times a week. However, I was going on vacation for 3 weeks and wanted to make sure that she had access to enough while I was away, so I left her with a lot more than I usually would. When I returned, I had come to collect, and everybody but her was up to date on their payments, and after excuse, she came to me to inform me that her new scale was set to the wrong measurement system and that she was out a good amount. I was upset and nearly kicked her off the team, but I've known this girl for years and it wasn't anything I couldn't recover on my own. However, she came to me when I was supposed to meet up with Mike to re-up, and because this took a lot longer than I thought, I was late to meet him. Now, remember when I said that you should never trust a biker unless you operate on the inside? I met with Mike to let him know what happened, apologized for being late, and informed him that the situation had been dealt with. But Mike was furious. He tells me that because I was late, he was late meeting his connect for the weed, and since he was late, this connect would never deal with him again. He told me to meet him at Josh's house and to bring who was responsible for making me late, and if I didn't bring them, then I would be held accountable because this connect had made him $5,000 a week in profit. Yes, you heard that right. This man told me that him being late once dissolved a profitable relationship with a connect that earned him $5,000 a week. I already knew what this meant for my runner. We were good friends, and there was no way I was going to allow a single mother to go through what I knew was coming. So I showed up to Josh's house on my own and waited for Mike. I sat on Josh's couch for what felt like hours, by myself, and uncertain of the extent of what was going to happen. Then Mike walks in, greets Josh, talks with his partners a bit, while completely ignoring me. First 5 minutes go by, then 10 minutes, then Mike walks over and I remember waking up on the floor. From what I was told, Mike hit me across the head and I blacked out. He proceeded to hit me for 2 to 3 more minutes until I woke up to him still hitting me. We sat on the couch and with a handgun to my head, he tells me that he's going to charge me the profit he would have made every week from his connect for the next year. For those keeping track, that's $260,000. He tells me that he's going to be generous enough to do the first payment of $5,000 within 48 hours, and that the money that I just gave him for my re-up didn't count, and that I needed to return the weed. Also that he was giving me 24 hours for each additional $5,000 after that. He took my car, which he underpriced at $10,000, and essentially planned on using me as a human ATM. At this point, I knew what was happening, and despite our relationship for the past year, he was going to exploit me for as long as he could until he had a reason to get rid of me. So, I went home and thought about my options. I had around $17,000 in cash, my RRSPs, savings, which amounted to just over $35,000, but even that would only get me by on the payments for a week. I realized that, and even if I was able to come up with half of the money, I would end up in jail or worse. After 24 hours of deliberating, I considered the fact that Mike had never met any of my runners. My family had moved away from this town after the death of the relative, and there was no way that I was going to risk my life or my freedom for some arbitrary debt. So I took all my cash, made my savings available, and knew I only had 24 hours to run as fast and as far as I could. 4:30 a.m., I gathered a bag full of clothes, called a lifelong friend of mine who had moved to another country 4 hours away, explained the situation, asked if I could stay on his couch for a week, and took a bus as close to the Greyhound station as I could get without stopping in front of it. The Greyhound didn't require photo ID at the time, and I didn't want to fly out of my own city in case anyone saw me, or Mike was able to figure out where I was going by pressing any of the airport staff. At this point, my heart was beating out of my chest. Although the Greyhound isn't as busy as the airport, if Mike or anyone he knew saw me there, it was game over. I waited an hour, then walked inside and bought a ticket for a city 3.5 hours away that had an airport. Before boarding, I wrote down all of my important contacts, removed the battery from my phone, dropped it down the sewer, and began my escape. 8:15 a.m., I stop in said city and buy a ticket to go and meet said friend. 12:30 p.m., I land in a country I've never been to, in a city I've never been to. My friend picks me up and we talk about the situation the entire way home. Him and I had a similar past. Although the story itself is ridiculous, he understands. When we arrive at his place, I cut my hair, decide on a new name I'll go by while staying in the city while deciding my next move. I get a new prepaid phone and number and try to relax. 6 p.m. I was supposed to meet Mike 30 minutes ago. The stress starts to kick in. 8 p.m. We've been drinking and telling stories, and I remembered that I hadn't deleted my Facebook. So I jumped onto my friend's laptop, threw on a VPN that was located in my home country, and was met with a flood of messages. Josh and Mike had kicked in my front door and destroyed my place. They left messages with the addresses of places they thought I was hiding out at. They told me that they were watching the airport and Greyhound station, and that it would be impossible for me to leave the city. It was at that point that I realized they never knew I left. Throughout the coming weeks, months, and years, I had a habit of changing phones and moved from city to city and country to country. I even did those work for your accommodation programs in a couple of countries as a tourist. Every few weeks and months, I would get an email from a single friend back home who would tell me that Josh or his girlfriend were telling people to ensure me that it was okay to come back and things had blown over. A couple times I even tried to reach out to some other friends back home, only to find out that they were trying to cash in on a reward that Mike had placed to anyone who could find out where I was. It eventually became easier to cut contact with any and everyone around me if I felt that I needed to move or felt that I couldn't entirely trust them. I could never go back to who I was or where I came from physically or mentally. I later found out that Mike had a nasty habit of hiring dealers. Then when he thought they made a good amount of money, he would conjure up some dire situation in which they would need to pay him back a crazy amount. He would drain them for every dime they had until they couldn't pay anymore. After that, they would usually end up in a ditch somewhere. One of his associates, who happened to be my next door neighbor back home, was recently charged for first-degree murder after taking a woman out to the woods and killing her. Although this did a number on my trust issues, I've made a lot of changes throughout my life since this event. I've changed my name. I'm in my mid-30s. I have an amazing corporate position in a company that changes lives. I speak to schools about the impact of poverty, and it's taught me to empathize with people in different positions than my own. I own a condo in a very beautiful city. I'm engaged. I took up learning a second language, and I never take the second chance I've been given for granted. I've been clean for just over 15 years now. I've never told anyone in my new life about what's happened. I don't even think they would believe me. Even though I take full responsibility for my stupidity in my younger years, to the biker that is waiting to collect on his ridiculous $260,000 debt, let's not meet again.